Welcome to New York Bio's Virtual Breakfast Series, a digital program started in 2020, bringing you fireside chats with leaders across the healthcare spectrum. This week's episode features Ryan Brady, Head of Global Discovery Business Development at Evotech International.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jennifer Hawksland, the CEO at New York Bio, and we're very excited you're joining us for another edition of our virtual breakfast. We look forward to having a great conversation today with Ryan Brady from Evotech. And before that, a special thank you to Vertex, who is sponsoring this month's series of breakfast. We very much appreciate their membership and partnership and all of the things that we do at New York Bio. New York Bio, I take at this time of year, I always take a point of personal privilege and invite you all to join us next Wednesday, September 27th at the New York Bio annual meeting. We have a discount code for our listeners and participants of our virtual breakfast series. So we'll be sure and we'll put that in the chat this morning to make sure you have it. If you haven't already registered, please do so. It's filling up pretty quickly. So we know we'll probably reach capacity by the end of the week. So go ahead and do your registrations. Housekeeping, if you have questions, and we know you will, for Ryan throughout the course of our conversation today, please put those in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll get to them during the course of the conversation. With that, I will turn it over to Derek to introduce our guest, and we'll get talking. Thanks.
All right. Ryan Brady from Evotech, it is wonderful to have you here. We have a ton of stuff that we can get into. I think one of the things we've seen over the last 10 or 15 years is kind of the rise of, for service providers, for lack of a better word, or contract organizations as a trusted partner and a real piece of the innovation spectrum. And I think that's enabled a lot of things. So why don't we get into it? Before we do, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you came from and how you got where you are?
Thanks, Derek. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks for hosting me. I really appreciate the opportunity. My career in the industry started at Eli Lilly and Company in Indianapolis as a chemist in the lab. I had an interesting role. It was a group. I think we had 4 or 5 different acronyms for the group over the time I was there, but in true big pharma fashion. But what we did was really served as the bridge between discovery and development. And so I think this was really the start of my career, and what I say is really helping to enable innovation. So I was supporting 4 or 5 different discovery programs and talking to their scientists about what were the key intermediates that they needed to really accelerate their program, looking at route development to get into scale up, et cetera. So that was my role, which was a lot of fun. I learned a lot of great chemistry, worked with a lot of great scientists at Lilly across a number of different therapeutic areas. And I think from that was the group at Lilly that really began to look at externalization. And so I moved into a group, Rob Armstrong and Jay McGill were kind of the leaders at Lilly in that space, and looking at how we could leverage different cost structures and different partners in different regions of the world. And so I spent a lot of time traveling to India and China, places like that, and setting up, Lilly's early collaborations in that space.
Ooh, what year was that?
It was 2007,
Okay.
2004, 2005, but kind of in that range.
Yeah.
I left in 2008. So
that was right around where kind of going and setting up operations in China was novel, right? I forget who the first larger biopharma to do it was, but that was really kind of I think the brick in the international infrastructure that made things real, right? There was always a stigma about work done in China. You weren't necessarily sure of quality, but once larger pharma companies really kind of hired people and set their own processes and kind of put their logo and their name on things, I think it lended an air of credibility there. And I think for those who knew, like, there was good science being done in China, and there were genuinely good scientists, but I think that was the thing that kind of allowed the industry to, get over a little bit of fear, or even, xenophobia in some ways around, kind of quality for work,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, learning, what you could and couldn't do, obviously that's changed over time as well. But yeah, it was an interesting experience. And then, from there, through that experience, I met John Euler, who you may know is the CEO of Beijing currently. He was his previous company, Bioduro, was a CRO primarily based in Beijing, China. So decided to leave Lilly and join him and on the business development side, and was there for really significant growth period. Learned a ton from John, and also the chairman of Bioduro is a gentleman named Masoud Tayabi, who's a very successful investor, and had a great experience. That's when I moved out to the East Coast in New Jersey from Indianapolis, and was there for quite a growth period. And they were eventually acquired by PPD. And so then during that period is when the opportunity came up with Evotec. And so that was 2011. And so when I joined Evotec, my focus initially it was a new position at Evotec, really, how do we leverage our platform and our capabilities more with venture capital? So at the time, Evotec was working primarily with kind of the mid-sized pharma companies in that space, and it was how do we, and so during those days, spent a ton of time up in Boston and really, signed a number of deals during that time with some of the Atlas companies, Padlock Therapeutics, which was ultimately acquired by BMS, where we were doing, the 90% of their lab work at Evotec, and many other examples over the year, but really, kind of leverage that, as I said at the beginning, really, having the right discussions, finding the right opportunities, leveraging Evotec's platform to enable innovation for our partners. And that's what I've been doing now for, 12 years at Evotec, and, sort of increasing responsibility over the time.
So how did you, I was just saying,
no, go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, I was just kind of take a step back. So when you came to Evotec and you were basically creating, right, a new sort of business line, or right, whatever, however you want to describe it, how did you approach thinking about interacting with someone that wouldn't have traditionally been a client, right, of the company? Like, you're creating a new client base essentially.
Well, I think, with anything like that, and it's all about asking the right questions and really trying to understand the needs and drivers of the partner, right? So, understandably, the venture capital funded biotech needs to move a little bit faster than some of, let's say, the conservative European mid-sized companies, especially back in that period of time. So it was all about speed and really working to accelerate timelines and talking through what are the key value inflections that we can deliver early that will help them, achieve their next tranche of funding.
Yes or no, or yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting because you were probably on the leading edge of now what is probably much more commonplace, right? So the venture creation funds who are basically funding a lot of science themselves to answer things like, are these repeatable? Are these experiments repeatable? Can we see these results again? It's almost it's the work that is done before even starting a company, which used to be done by an entrepreneur or a couple of people on kind of the diligence side, or kind of pushing the academic professors and things. But now a lot of that work is done on the venture side, and that's really kind of the hands-on thing. And you have group like Atlas, like Third Rock, that do a lot of this stuff themselves. But I really think that was probably around the advent of where they were doing that. No?
Yeah, no, I think worked with a number of folks there and other venture groups at kind of that early formative stage. Padlock, for example, had another name before it was Padlock, and that's when we started working with them. Yeah. So to give you a sense of when we were involved, and we've seen that many other times where that early engagement. I mean, the benefit of once you really understand Evotec and the power that we bring. Many times we talk to groups and it's 6-9 months later, they're still deciding what to do. Whereas, if you have the right engagement with Evotec, we can already have your data returned and back to you to inform your decisions. And, right. We can, we do that in a very collaborative way that I think really can enable quick decisions.
So at the time, what was the driving force to actually go to venture capital? Was it that there was just this, either untapped well of kind of startups and early stage science, or was it something along the lines of, kind of once they got going and the company was formed, like you were out of the game because they already had whoever they were going to go with if they were going to do external work?
I think D, all of the above,
Yeah.
is really the answer to that. I mean, yeah, I think it's great to get in. I think it's, best when you get in to kind of help shape, the scope of the company. We benefit from, very strong, deep and broad capabilities and expertise that, often, companies will come to us and we can, ask a question or say, did you think about this? And it really helps change the direction of what they're trying to do. So it's that type of engagement that can really be impactful for those companies.
Was there any talk at the time about, thinking along the lines of, equity instead of fee for service?
Yeah, we operate across a broad range of different business models. I mean, we have limitations as a publicly traded company, and we have our commitments to our investors around profitability, et cetera. So we have taken equity in lieu of or for reduced payments. We make equity investments into companies separately as well. I think over 30 equity investments we've made separately. We see ourselves a bit as an operational venture capital group
Mm-hmm.
that really can deploy capital and resources. So yeah, we do we see a broad range of different risk sharing type structures as well, and it really depends on if you think about early stage collaboration. I always think a nice visual is pieces of a puzzle, right? And so
Yeah.
we have a broad number of puzzle pieces we can bring to the table. The partner has some, and we just align and figure out how they all fit together. There's not one size fits all to partnering with Evotech, just given the complexities of all the scientific challenges we're trying to address in the industry.
Yeah.
Have you seen it what about the US versus Europe sort of versus rest of world, right? How have you seen these types of relationships grow across the globe? And is it different for different geographies? Has how things have matured, or are you seeing it sort of all the way around?
I think it's in generally it's not that different. It's about finding the right partnership and how things work together. They take slightly different shapes. The European venture typically doesn't have the size of funding that US companies have.
Yeah.
Maybe one discrepancy. It's much more staged investment. But the types of relationships and the types of engagement that we have is very very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because one thing that we've seen is from a New York perspective, right, is that a lot of times European companies will come here and engage early because they have consular support, right, in New York. And so that's been one component of kind of some of the work that New York Bio has done. And we actually did a showcase during the pandemic, which when everything was totally virtual, which was great, and we featured all European companies, and we were able to to make those connections then.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up kind of the difference between the US and Europe in terms of startup companies. And I had a question here about, basically we've seen over the last, however many years, A rounds just got larger and larger and larger, right? So what has that really done to the way that, Evotech thinks about that market? And, has that kind of changed really the attractiveness of what we'll call a startup, or, work for larger companies that may be a little more stable, the contract size may be larger, et cetera? Has that kind of changed the game a little bit in terms of how you think about the market and which companies are more attractive to go after?
No, I mean, it makes it a little easier, but it doesn't necessarily change who we go after, right? I mean, we really want to work with people doing great science, whether they have $1 million or $100 million, right? And that's pretty unique to Evotech. I mean, obviously, if we can sign a larger deal, longer term relationships, that's easier for everybody. But at the same time, if we can be part of that company that has $1 million and having them raise $100 million, that's pretty cool too, right? And that's where our scientific team really engages in the science and wants to make those types of contributions. I think, I think it makes a ton of sense for the industry, to have, more funding and more long-term options, right? If you think about, getting to that next value inflection point and having the leverage over, a pharma deal that you can decide whether you want it or not because you already have the funding lined up, that just makes a ton of sense, I think. So to me, it's a positive sign because there's so many challenge, the difficulties of the science that people are addressing today, is real. And so if you have a bit more flexibility to run the right, and we need to be efficient and smart about how we spend that money, but I think you're going to have some failed experiments, and then you have that flexibility to adjust your research plan and still be successful.
A little while back, Evotech also started doing partnerships with academic institutions. Yes.
Yeah, we do. We have a number. I think most publicly and advanced is what we call Lab 282. This was set up with Oxford University with a dedicated pool of funding from a couple different sources. With the concept really of leveraging an Evotech entrepreneur that has full access to the 5,000 people at Evotech and all the capabilities and expertise to really look at proposals, generate proposals, work together with the PI to identify that key killer experiment. And it's been highly successful. The number of proposals that have been, submitted is, around 200. They've executed, I think, 75 or so, and it's led to, formation of one company, Dark Blue Therapeutics, which is a basket of oncology programs that came out of that. And there's a number of, the programs continuing to ongo. And so that's definitely an area of expansion. It really gets into that, what I talked a little bit about earlier around designing an experiment and then executing it without spending too much time, right? I mean, the cost of some of these experiments can be $100,000. If you hire consultants and you think about what you're going to do for 6 to 9 months, you've already spent that money. So it's really about operational efficiency and execution of these opportunities to really inform future investment. And we do it in a way where you can then really push company creation down the road a little bit till you have some further validation. And I think that lining that up, and we benefit from a pretty quality brand and perception, such that when you take some Evotech generated data into a venture discussion, it holds its worth. So
it does. They know where it came from. There's a level of validity there that they trust. I mean, certainly more than it's ironic, right? But it's certainly more trustworthy than what is perceived in academia. So to just keep going on this for a little while, I think it would be interesting to know how this came about, right? Because it kind of flies in the face a little bit of the expectations for academic research, right? They for a long time they didn't really go outside the walls of the institution. But was this really almost on academia's part? Did they see that as a consequence of universities are more forward looking in the way that they kind of foster startup companies, and there was this trend where if you kind of bake things a little bit more internally, the startup gets going on better footing.
Yeah.
You likely can attract different capital. Was it really kind of a pull from academia or a push there? What were some of the things that went into that?
I'll put a little asterisk. This is core to Evotech, but this is not my core response, day to day of what I do.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
but I'm happy to,
Yep.
give the higher level perspective. So I think I'm giving a very generic all of the above answer today, but I think it was really, it's one option, right? So obviously in any academic, there's, top tier, scientists, PIs that can generate 20 million, 30 million, based on their science, based on their brand and their reputation for doing great science. But it's the earlier stage, PIs that maybe don't have that credibility, that, need a different outlet, right? So I think it started really as a different mechanism where we could provide a tranche seed with a an efficient infrastructure, right? So this isn't where we're negotiating terms at the beginning of each discussion. It's prearranged and baked into the system so that people know if they go this route, these are their obligations, these are their commitment to these investors, these are commitment to Evotech, and it's defined. And so it's just it's just systematically, it's just a straightforward process. And so I think then it's expanded and it's looking into additional geographies that may not have the attention of Boston, New York, San Francisco, and bringing in kind of some local money that can be part of that early stage. So then it's a really a mix of different reasons.
Yeah, that's what I was actually going to ask about that. I seem to be asking the global questions today, right? So like clearly Cambridge was your first and important, like an important partnership in that process. And then do you have any I didn't see it on your website, so you may not have anything public, but are you all open to working with universities in the US? And it seems like you may have just answered that.
Yeah, we do. So we have one on the West Coast. It's a group called Audubon Labs, and it together with Samsara Capital. There's one in Canada called Lab 150 with the Mars Innovation. I'm blanking on their new name, TIAP. And there's others, in Europe that we have as well. There's a dedicated one in Italy, for example. So it's quite broad and an area that we do see will continue to expand. And really I think it's a good fit for the industry because it creates it's not we're not putting 20 million. This is seed type funding that will then create more validated opportunities for the rest of this ecosystem to invest in.
Yeah, it basically, it kind of gives you a little more trust of and a little more validity in what comes out the door initially, right? And I think from an industry perspective, if you think about all of the things that quote unquote get started, or all of the things that could take a dollar of investment money, you would much rather have fewer of them fail because they couldn't replicate science, right? That from an industry there, and it's an unfortunate miss. And what we do is hard enough already without having unfortunate where you kind of just can't replicate the initial experiments, or where we would benefit from having that first step be something that is more true and get things off on the right foot, so you can actually see where the science genuinely goes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, okay. Derek, you're having a little bit of, we may have a little bit of buffering issue with you.
Okay,
Ryan, could you hear it, or was it just me?
I could hear it, but it was very very slow. But it definitely came through in a staged way.
Okay, I will move shortly, but I will tell you we'll travel.
We'll do the adjustment.
Yes.
So yeah. So what are the other? So we've talked about academics. We've talked about sort of VCs, and then talk to us a little bit about the you see Evotech seeing itself also, right, as creating venture capital and creating value with direct investments in companies. How did that come about? Because I don't think that that's sort of the typical approach, right, for what traditionally had been a sort of service provider, contractual relationship, providing a service for a fee.
True, but I think also worth noting, we've also invest considerably in our own internal R&D as well, which is not so I think maybe to take a step back, I mean, Evotech really has biotech origins. We've acquired a number of biotechs. We've taken over 6 ex-pharma sites. So I think thinking about us as really a service provider is maybe missing the mark, right? So I think the way to think about us is essentially an R&D biotech that offers pipeline building, innovative partnerships, solutions and products, and also CRO, CDMO services. So it's really around that culture of innovation. So we have, therapeutic area leads, and, if they see something that comes in that they want to invest in, they'll make a recommendation to the board, and we either invest on balance sheet or off balance sheet. And so some of it is more just, we've grown quite significantly, over the years, and have, been in a pretty strong position that we've been able to kind of expand and look at, different types of internal and external, off balance sheet, on balance sheet investments. And it's just been a bit, opportunistic, and, the strategy, continues to evolve based on, where we are as an organization.
Right. And even earlier in Evotech, you had to have some very forward-looking and innovative. You were already innovating what you're doing, but then you had to innovate how they thought about the business and how they thought about growth.
Right. I mean, so, Evotech, well before I joined, had Evotech Neurosciences, and, we failed in the clinic like many others back in that period, but really have that really legacy, disease biology expertise and knowledge. And so when it comes to, picking novel targets and opportunities for investments, investing in novel platforms, expansions, et cetera, it's kind of part of our culture, and what we do and what we bring to our partners.
Yeah. And bringing you on board was evidence of that, right? I mean, you came in to create something new.
Yeah, we've done much more innovative things than bring me on board, but
take the compliment.
So when I remember ages ago that, I mean, Evotech's roots are all in small molecules, right? But obviously the industry has expanded to a number of different modalities. So what was it like for Evotech to think about, kind of going into different modalities and kind of building up that level of expertise, right? Because it's not, you can't just kind of snap your fingers and, and have, trusted antibody expertise. And I imagine antibodies probably came a little bit slower, but, gene therapy and cell therapy came on the market, came like that, right? So how did Evotech think about expanding, into those areas, and how did they build that level of expertise? Because you want the company to have credibility across the entirety of what they do.
Yeah, so I would say, the real push into it, more and more the types of partnerships we are forming are where we work together with someone. We have a number visibly with Bayer for years, endometriosis, kidney disease, et cetera, where here's the disease we want to solve, or we want to make an impact on. Well, that might not be a small molecule for that particular target, for that particular approach. And so really making the decision that we needed to expand that toolbox is really the driver. So we see this more and more, particularly in, some of the AI biotechs that are being created, where they'll have like some really great set of targets, and it's really, okay, which one's the best to deliver a drug? Is that a small molecule? Is that an antibody, et cetera? And so it's really wanting to bring that whole toolbox to bear. And so I think each modality kind of has its own story to it.
Yeah.
I would say on the cell therapy side, I mean, Evotech has, longstanding history in phenotypic screening, and, working with, complex cells and screening. So therefore being able to handle those cells. That was then a step into iPSC-based drug discovery for target identification, et cetera. But then, was a natural next step then to get into iPSC allogeneic cell therapy. So it's sort of, taking, a base set of expertise, and then either expanding through organic building or acquisition.
Yeah.
On the antibody side, several years ago, we made the acquisition of Just Biologics, which was a group of ex-Amgen people out in Seattle that really had invested into continuous manufacturing, leveraging AI, machine learning, both in terms of looking at developability and then the continuous manufacturing, with a goal to, really reduce the cost of goods in that continuous process. And then, looking to expand there and building out, more of, expanding on the discovery work that they'd already done, and then, leveraging Evotech's discovery, disease biology expertise to be able to bring that as a comprehensive solution. So today, at our site in Toulouse, you can, go from, well, the construction's still ongoing, will be completed soon. You can start a program in the antibody space at a target and take it all the way through commercial production. Is the end goal.
And they only did biologics, right?
Say again?
And they only did biologics, right?
Just was only in biologics. Yeah.
Sorry, I saw the opportunity for a dad joke there, and I had to just jump on top of it. There had to be a bit of marketing around that one that some other dad joke loving person thought was a great idea.
Yeah, so I mean that's really the history. It's basically just leveraging internal expertise, making acquisitions where necessary, and trying to bring that full platform end to end shared R&D platform to our partners.
So you mentioned AI companies before, and we're now contractually obligated to ask you about it. So how does Evotech, and how do you look at AI broadly in terms of, are you establishing your own AI capabilities? And like you said, it's actually impacting the kinds of companies, the kind of deals that you work on. So just broadly, how is AI affecting what you do?
I think we are investing across the board, from medchem design to target identification. We have invested heavily in our panomics platform and AI tools in terms of being able to analyze that data that's generated. So we think it will definitely have a major impact in increasing the probability of success and decreasing the cost. Right. I think we're at a point in the industry where medicines take 10 to 15 years, any range of 2.5 to 5 billion to reach a patient, depending on what numbers you look, and that really has to change, especially with some of the changes to the Inflation Reduction Act, et cetera, where the AI is really a key tool to help drive that. I think it will be, we don't see it as a panacea. We see it as a tool that will be leveraged, with the rest of the expertise and platform that we have, to do that. We've spent a lot of time, just in one particular example, you can have the best design tools out there, but if it takes you a month, 2 months to test that molecule, you're not really any faster than just making more molecules. So you've got to be able to really design the molecule and test that in rapid fashion to be able to, move the program along quickly.
So here's a bit of a different one. Do you kind of see yourself in this role as almost a bit of an industry educator, right? So if I were to come to you as a potential client, and if I didn't know, what some of these, AI tools did, you seem like you would be a trusted resource in me genuinely asking you, how well does this work? What does this do? What are some of the parameters of each of these kind of techniques? Is that kind of a role that you play pretty often? Because it seems like a role that Evotech is pretty well suited to play across the industry, especially in places where the technology is moving so fast that people really aren't probably sure about what some of the risks or capabilities are.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, comprehensively across the board, but I think there certainly are areas where we can, give that feedback and guidance, for sure, across the board, across different technologies, even beyond AI.
And are you seeing, you mentioned my least favorite and yet oft talked about term, the Inflation Reduction Act, because obviously New York Bio engages in a lot of government affairs and policy work, and we work with legislators. Are you seeing your partners, your research partners, changing the way they develop programs yet based on payment models contained in the Inflation Reduction Act and the potential penalties, like, for example, penalties for small molecule development?
My new favorite German expression is "Jein," which means yes and no.
Yeah.
I picked up from my new boss. So, I think there's some reprioritization, in, let's say, larger pharma portfolios, but I talking to a number of venture groups and asking them that question: is it really changing what they do? At the end of the day, you've got to have innovative science and have the ability to make an impact. And if you still, maybe changes, some of the, market considerations, but it's not really stopping people from investing in small molecules.
Do you see yourselves kind of playing a role in terms of almost making that a bit more, palatable, saying, no, 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 we can, we can do this faster, we can do this cheaper, we can still make it into, it's don't worry, it's not going away. This is still an attractive investment. We can do it
Yeah.
on the time scale we need to.
No, for sure. I think that, that gets into, some of the points I've already made about, speed and, I think at the end of the day, people would, some would still compare an FTE rate at Evotech to somewhere in Asia and say, well, that's more expensive. But at the end of the day, that's not what you're buying. You're buying a drug, a candidate to go into IND enabling studies, and it's about how quickly you do that. And so that's where we feel, really in a strong position that. The combined effort of the full platform really can accelerate that development and increase the probability of success. And it's the discussion we have, and I think the real best way to engage Evotech is that way, even down to the target selection and picking the ones that are most likely to be druggable. So we'll continue to work at how we bring in technologies, develop technologies to really accelerate that discovery to development continuum.
Yeah. Are those FTE rate conversations getting more difficult as Asia has kind of up their game and up the quality of thing? Are those conversations tougher to have now?
I would say Yine again. I think it really depends. I think it depends. If you're dealing with a kinase, then it's all about just making some molecules. Then it's a difficult. But if we're leveraging a differentiated disease biology or platform for screening or testing molecules in iPSC cells, that it's not really it's an apples and an oranges kind of comparison.
Yeah.
But certainly that there's a place for that as well.
Yeah. I imagine it's nice as you progress to have the questions get harder rather than doing kind of the same thing and making it all about a price discussion.
So what are speaking of questions, like when you start a conversation, right, with a potential partner, what are the questions you want to be asked as Evotech? What is the most important thing for you to be able to talk to those potential partners about?
Well, it's more, I would say the more important part is, what questions do I need to ask them, right? So it's, what are their goals? What are their objectives? What are they trying to accomplish? When do they need to accomplish it by? And, how open are they to, our team engaging and helping steer that, right? So you have we see in this industry quite a different range of experience with founders and in early stage companies in terms of knowing what they need to do. And so I think it depends where they're coming from and how they're do they have, and what support do they have from their current investors. And so, on our side, it's, I would say just they need to try to understand who we are and how we're different, will be the biggest, value to them. And I think that's where, we always, try to, get time with our scientists and really show that type of engagement that we have and that excitement that we have for really driving innovative science.
Yeah. So we have a question in the chat. And it says, would it be fair to say that AI can shift the bottleneck of drug development from modeling multiple iterations of potential molecule to its development and testing? Or has the bottleneck always been with development and testing? And I read this, and my knee-jerk reaction was that the major bottleneck is the time in clinical trials. However, I figured I would throw that ball over to you and talk a little bit about kind of the value of getting the best candidate early on and actually putting in the discovery work early on.
I mean, at the end of the day, you only need to make one molecule if you make the right one. So, whether that's AI or a good medicinal chemist, it's all about making the right molecule. We had, one partner, that worked with us, and they ended up pulling the work because they wanted to, go make, methyl ethyl propyl, and it didn't make sense to do that at Evotec. You could do that at a cheaper rate, but they also came back 9 months later and hadn't really made any progress. So it's really, I think it's a tool to enhance. So we also look at kind of barcoding our molecules, if you will, around did AI predict this, or was it a medicinal chemist? So we'll over time we'll have a bit more data that we'll be able to say, well, where did these ideas really come from, and how are they impacted by the different tools and approaches. So I think it's definitely an enhancement, and will accelerate it. But today, you're not going to design the one molecule that's going to be your drug.
Yeah, I also think one of the things that isn't appreciated is that the way that financing is staged, right? There's actually a lot more checkpoints early, right? You're usually working with incomplete information, and the better your early data set is, and the better your early data is, the more likelihood you are to be able to raise capital expediently, right? Once you're in clinical trials, you raise another slug of money to put it through the next tranche of clinical development. There's not a lot of, if you fund the entire study, you run the study over the course, you're not raising money before it's done necessarily. You're raising money on results early on. You have a bunch more checkpoints that you have a bunch more hoops that you have to jump through, and you have a bunch more kind of gates that you need to pass. So that kind of places a pretty good premium on those experiments, because frankly, if it costs you 9 months of fundraising time every time you have to do something new, that those years add up.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that gets back to the earlier conversation about larger funding raises through funding through clinical proof of concept. Just make a ton of sense, so that you take some of that time delay off the table.
Yeah.
So as you think about, so let's kind of bring it back. So talk to us about, we are NewYorkBIOs, so we want to talk about our New York ecosystem. No surprises there. Talk to us about sort of Evotec's work, and has it grown in our, and I think I'm going to call it a region, right? Because I think you include New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, right, in this sort of region. What are you seeing there development wise?
Yeah, I think we definitely see that growth as well. I think that we have a couple of public collaborations in the area. We work with the Mark Foundation for Cancer Research, and in a couple of different programs, both in terms of we both co-invested in a platform technology that we have. That we've been working on, and actually trying to create a new company around. We've also supported, one of their academics in a later stage IND enabling study, and then also an early stage high throughput screen. So, range of different types of collaborations that we have in New York. I'm trying to think of, other ones that are public, but yeah, a number of, different biotechs that we've worked with and supported. And, I think there's, different ways. I mean, I think this to me is why working at Evotec is fun, is that you can work with people in different ways. So there's one, collaboration fully, integrated from target to IND filing, for a particularly well-funded biotech. And then the others is, we have our site in Princeton, where we do a lot more of, the traditional CRO type work and protein production, cell line generation that can, feed and be nice proximity, for efficiency in supporting those biotechs. So there's a range of different ways we've worked with biotechs in New York. And I think to me, there's an increasing number. There's a new venture fund that we're in discussions with, that I think will make an impact in the area as well. And I've seen a number of funds that have been created over the last created and new funds raised over the last few years. So it's really great to see the growth in the area.
That you mentioned the Mark Foundation, which we obviously work closely with them. We work with a lot of both patient advocacy foundations as well as patient research foundations. So talk to us a little bit about that. Like I think we've seen a growth in the number of what would have traditionally been sort of patient foundations, and now they do a lot more research, even like you're talking about, even to sort of IND holders now, right? So talk to us about the evolution of that piece of sort of the treatment paradigm?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of different approaches that the groups take. So we've had a 15, 17-year collaboration with the CHDI Foundation, which also has offices in New York, and really leveraged a large team, really trying to identify cures in Huntington space. And so that's they're considerably well funded organization. Otherwise, we worked with other groups with on smaller projects, and it's great to just kind of see that engagement. I mean, one of the groups, I won't disclose because they've changed their strategy slightly, but at the time said we fund the work that no one else will, right? And so to me, that's really cool, right? To be able to say this is too early, this is too out there, for a traditional venture group to invest in. So we're going to put some money into it and see if we can validate this, and then then maybe others will be interested in. So I think that's the benefit of those organizations coming in, where they really have that commitment to the particular disease, and they're willing to do anything they can. Obviously some have greater financial limitations than others, but that passion and that commitment is great to see.
Yeah, it's interesting how almost all roads lead to investment in a lot of ways. You now have seen, these foundations kind of start their own funds. Evotech now kind of, plays as its own fund. I think for, at some point, I think everyone realizes the value of success in biotech, right? If you're good at something and you have a chance of participating in the upside, especially if you get something right, that upside is significant. So it seems like there's just this eventual market draw for people to participate in equity and participate in the upside of anything associated with biotech, even if it means, putting money at risk or anything like that.
Yep.
And that's one, and one thing we do see is a lot of those patient focused research foundations have are either located in New York or have an office, like you were saying, CHDI, right? Huntington's Foundation did. And so that's been, I think that also plays into our sort of, we'll call it downstream, right? But our ability within the region to do clinical trial work on a very diverse, right, body of subjects here in New York.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, at the end of the day, we're most of us are in this business for two reasons. One, to deliver cures to patients, and then there's obviously the financial drivers behind it that helps fuel that investment. I think you look at what we're still had such an impact in COVID, and you see, I think to me, very exciting to see all the progress in the obesity space, which is going to have a major health impact going forward. And I think to me, I think that will really fuel the next wave of investment into the space, is the success there. I mean, to me, I think it parallels, some of the progress in the immune oncology space from years ago. And so I think, there will be money that continues to come into the market. I think there's the doom and gloom, to me, is a little bit overhyped at the moment. I think that, getting back to, still at or, above previous investment levels is perhaps a good thing. But I think it's that innovation and impact on patients that I think will continue to fuel the investment in the space.
Do you ever see a scenario where kind of the pendulum swings back the other way? Right, we've had so much, and I think we're seeing maybe a little bit of it now, where it's harder for folks to raise money. But I think the last 5 years or so, with all of the capital that's gotten deployed, I think it's shown, it's at least opened the door for a lot of other players to be involved in investing in biotech. Do you ever see that going away? Does it contract, or are kind of all of the new investment modalities here to stay?
I would think and hope that it's here to stay. I think that if you look at of an approved drug that hits 50% of patients, has an impact on 50% of patients, right? So even for where we have developed cures, there's still a lot of work to be done, let alone the diseases where there are no cures. So I think, to me, that situation won't change. I think, you look at the pandemic, you look at multi-drug resistant, bacteria. I think that there's a lot of problems that, as a society that, we face that I think will continue to, fuel that investment.
So how do we tackle the ones that investment has, for better or for worse, kind of shut the door on, right? I mean, you mentioned antibiotic resistance and resistant bacteria. We've had a very hard time of getting anything over the goal line, even commercially, even when things that work, right? So how do we think about those kinds of problems, right?
A bit out of my area of expertise, and obviously no one else really has that answer either. But
then you should feel free to opine, right?
in the infectious disease, I think Evotec now has probably one of the largest research units across the globe. It's because we see that as from a longer term view. Our business needs and drivers. So we took over a large site from Sanofi in Lyon. Broad expertise, across the spectrum, working in that space, and so we have kind of a long term play there. And it's about efficiency and delivering things to the market. And so that's our approach. But I do think there needs to be, some market drivers and some, governmental influence really to change that situation. But I don't have the solution. We'll focus on, trying to deliver things more capital efficiently as our contribution.
If you get the solution, you can come back.
Yes.
We usually don't have repeat guests, but if you get that solution, we'll let you back.
Okay.
We'll just give you a whole hour to talk about.
Yes, no, you can lay out the whole plan. That is worth enough to society where we will basically have you back and we will give you the floor.
Great.
So what do you?
I'll get working on that.
Yes, thank
you. Let
us know. So what do you see as sort of when you look ahead, right? 5 years, 10 years. What do you see as the shift from where we are now? We talked about, Derek asked the question about the pendulum swinging, but like, what are potentially sort of new ways to partner and develop therapeutics and, sort of, I know this isn't as much but get them to patients, right? Yeah. So what are you excited about to see coming?
I think where I see the trend is, more and more people realizing what they're really good at and focusing on that and trying to find ways of working together, right? And that, fits into, the academic collaborations, that fits into, there's a, considerable growth in New York and beyond of incubator type companies that really help facilitate that growth and help accelerate that, which is, perhaps a whole separate other discussion. But I think it's really, I mentioned the puzzle earlier, right? But, the ecosystem, working better together, to deliver, medicines to patients. I think that's really what I see, hopefully is a continued trend. And, you've number of examples, that show that across the industry of organizations working together and really having that impact. The growth of, pharma pipeline from external is obviously a key example of that. And so I think that would be my goal and aspiration, is that we continue to collaborate and partner. This is we're trying to address really complicated diseases, and the more we can bring the right minds and teams together, the better we'll all be.
That sounds like a panacea, right? It's just like, yes, that sounds fantastic. Oh, we have one last question under the wire here. Okay, so, and I know that you have some information on this on your website. So what are Evotec's current collaborations with generics or branded generics companies to leverage going forward? And does that impact your other businesses?
Generics is not a space that we, heavily engage in. So I think that's, not really, doesn't have much impact on the other business. Not a focus area for us.
Any biosimilars work?
So I guess that's probably the one exception is, we announced a large deal with our Just organization that I mentioned earlier with Sandoz to a strategic biosimilars space there. Yep.
Well, we've only got a couple minutes left, and I would ask you if you could see where, what's next for Evotech, right? I mean, you can expand on a bunch of capabilities, but really, if you get to the point where you've done, if you've done everything and stayed on top of the discovery and chemistry space, do you actually ever think about going into manufacturing? Do you ever think about going into clinical work? Like, what's the next stage of evolution for Evotech as a company?
So we already are in manufacturing, on the antibody side through commercial production, small molecules, through kind of phase 2 stage, and in some cases for rare diseases all the way to the market. So already areas we're doing. We have a couple of clinical trials ongoing as well. There's one phase 1 program that is ongoing with an Australian company, Casia, licensed an asset that was generated by Evotech and put in the clinic. It's in a phase 1 trial in Toulouse, France right now. So those are all areas that we're doing. So I think we'll continue to grow and expand in multiple different directions. I think heavy investment into the panomics platform that I mentioned earlier, our cell therapy side, as well as the continued expansion of the Just platform, and then finally, the what we call the end-to-end shared R&D. So that's investing in a range of different technologies to really help accelerate the research of our partners.
This has been great, Ryan. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I know based on the questions that our audience has as well. Thank you so much. Thank you to Evotech for doing what you do. Thank you to you for bringing the story to our audience and for sharing with us. We look forward to seeing you and your colleagues around our ecosystem events. And that gives me the opportunity for a last plug, right, for our New York Bio annual meeting next Wednesday, September 27th in Midtown. And the discount code is VBS 2023 exclamation point. I think when Derek put it in the chat, it was missing the exclamation
I didn't put the exclamation point.
Yes,
Sorry.
So on that exclamatory note,
I will put in my last thank you for hosting us as well, and I'll also put in another plug for you. That'll have a couple of my team members will be at your event. So if anybody wants to follow up with them, they'll be available.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Ryan. We appreciate it. All right, take care, everyone.
Have a great day, everybody.